Before we get into today's episode, I want to make sure that you know about something I just put together for you last week. It is called the Low Effort, High Love Connection Guide, and it's completely free. It's just 25 connection activities that are sorted by age from infants through age 10, and most of them take under 5 minutes to do. So if you are a working mom who gets home totally depleted and you don't know what to do with the hour that you do have left before bedtime, this guide was made exactly for that situation. So you can grab it right now at drmelissawelch.com/connect, CONNECT. All right, so let's get into today's episode. Well, hey, and welcome back to another episode of Heart and Health Wellness. I'm your host, Dr. Melissa Welch, and I'm so glad that you are here. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist with a PhD in medical family therapy, and I'm also a working mom myself. So this podcast is for working moms who are in healthcare, education, and other helping professions. Women who give absolutely everything to their patients, their students, and their clients all day long and still want to feel like themselves and feel close to their own children when they get home in the evening. If that is you, I'm so glad that you are here. Now let's go ahead and get into today's episode. So today we are going somewhere that a lot of podcasts aren't necessarily willing to go because it's an uncomfortable subject, and we're talking about resentment, specifically the kind that builds up in a working mom who feels like she's doing absolutely everything, and there's a good chance that she is. And she's also watching her partner move through life seemingly unbothered by all of it, or maybe we'll give them the benefit of the doubt. They are bothered by it, but they're not doing as much as she is. And this, let me be very clear, is not an episode where we are bashing on husbands or anything like that. I'm just saying, I know there are plenty of working moms out there who feel like they are carrying most of the weight around their home. So maybe you felt it, that slow burning coming from a full day of giving everything that you have to your patients or your students or your clients. And then you walk in the door and you find that the dishes are still in the sink and maybe your partner is there on the couch. Or there's this like low grade of frustration of being the one who almost always is the one to remember the pediatrician appointments and the permission slip that needs to be filled out, the fact that Friday is water day, or the fact that you are down to your last pull-up or two. Maybe yours is a little different. Maybe the resentment isn't really about your partner at all. Maybe it's more about the life that you thought you would have versus the version or that version where you were home with your kids and not handing them off to someone else every morning. And so there's resentment sitting there under the surface. Maybe you're not even sure who or what it's actually pointed at. You can just feel this kind of tension going on. That is exactly what this episode is for, because before you can do anything about the resentment, you have to know what you are actually resentful about. And those are two very different problems with two very different solutions. So I want to get into that and help you figure out which one is appropriate for you so you know what to do with it. So I want to start by reading you something that a mom posted online because I think it's going to feel a little bit familiar for you, maybe even uncomfortably familiar. She wrote that she and her husband thought that they could make it work with her staying at home, but it just wasn't financially feasible. And she said she harbors resentment about it and wishes she could let it go. She said she wants to do all the traditional things, but since she works, it is just a whole different lifestyle and it's really hard for her. And the truth is, that's the same story that I hear from a lot of the moms that I talk to, is that maybe there's this part of them that romanticizes the idea of being able to stay home, but it's not an option for their family. And so they have to do what they've got to do. And you just keep going. But that resentment builds up that your life doesn't look the way that you want it to look. And the responses that this mom received were really interesting. One mom said she just sees it as her way of loving and providing for her daughter. Another said that being a stay-at-home mom and living well is just not financially possible for most families. And yet another said that what you are doing as a working mom is a sacrifice for your children, and that's a brave thing. Really nice, beautiful reframe that mom gave. So all of those responses are true and they are kind, but here's what I noticed as a therapist that it was missing. None of them actually address the resentment itself. They redirect it, they reframe it, they offer perspective and encouragement. The perspective and the encouragement is helpful, but it doesn't necessarily make or give her a strategy for releasing the resentment and making the resentment go away. Because resentment is not just thinking about the issue. It's not a thinking problem. It's a feeling that is sitting in your body. It's stored in your body, whether that's in your chest or your shoulders or your back or just tightness all over, whatever it might be. That feeling sitting in your body is telling you something very specific. And until you get super clear about what it is that it's actually telling you, it's just going to keep building because it needs a release. It needs a place to go. It needs you to do something with it. So before we talk about what to do, I want to help you figure out exactly what you're actually dealing with, because there's two very different kinds of resentment that working moms carry, and they get confused with each other all the time. Very normal. Okay. So the first kind is what I call situational resentment. This is the resentment that you might experience toward your circumstances. You didn't choose to work full time, or you did choose it, but now that you're doing it, it's not what you wanted. It doesn't look the way that you hoped your life would look. Maybe you chose the career that you're in. You worked really hard to get there, but it doesn't necessarily feel the way you wanted it to. And you don't feel like you chose this way of feeling every day. You did not choose for childcare to cost what it cost, and you did not choose for the mental load to fall so unevenly on your shoulders. And you did not choose for the system to be so poorly designed for working moms, because you watched the women before us do it and we thought we can do that too. And now we're in it realizing this isn't sustainable. Thanks for leading the way for us, paving the path for us to have options, but this isn't what we wanted. So this kind of resentment is not really about your partner. They just happen to be standing nearby and in the way sometimes. And because your husband or your partner is the person closest to you and the one that you compare your experience to most directly because they're the one that you can see, he might become the target. But if he disappeared from the picture, the resentment would still be there because it's about the situation, not the person. Now, the second kind is what I call relational resentment. And this is resentment toward your partner specifically because you feel like they aren't doing their share. He's not seeing what you see. He doesn't carry what you carry. And he might clock out in a way that you never get to. So over time, the scorekeeping starts. And then that gap between what you give and what he gives feels bigger and bigger and bigger. And you hyper focus on that gap, which also makes it more difficult to see the good things about that person. And so you really start to resent them in a very intense way, and it grows and it grows and it grows. And this kind is genuinely about him or your partner, the person. It is about the dynamic between the two of you. And it absolutely needs to be addressed differently than situational resentment because the solution is relational, not individual. So here's the important thing to remember. Most working moms are carrying both of these types of resentment at the same time. And when they try to have a conversation with their partner about how they're feeling, it comes out as everything all at once because they haven't been able to separate the two. And so it feels to him like an attack and to her like he's not hearing her. And then the conversation just escalates, gets more intense, and it ends up fizzling out and it doesn't go anywhere or solve anything. So the first thing that I want you to do is really sit with this question. When I feel resentful, am I angry at my life or am I angry at my partner specifically? Not which one is more justified, but just which one is actually driving that feeling right now. And I want you to write down both separately. And this is just the starting point for awareness. I also want to make a quick point about writing things down. I have clients tell me all the time that they're not comfortable journaling because they don't want someone else to find it. And I totally get that. And I have dealt with couples in therapy where one of them found a journal and told the other one about it, and it turned into a huge fight. Journaling therapeutically is about releasing everything. We're not talking about writing your autobiography here and tracking every little detail. If you want to do that, that's something completely separate. When you are journaling therapeutically, you just need to let everything out without worrying about grammar, spelling, punctuation, none of it. You're just getting it out. So it's no longer in your body. It's out on paper. Now, when you're done with that exercise, if you want to shred or get rid of that paper so there's not an evidence trail, that is totally fine, because how you're feeling in that moment and is not necessarily how you're going to feel all the time. And if you don't feel safe having that stuff written down in your house, then get rid of it. You can also do it on an app on your phone that has a lock or something to make it more secure like that. But I do think there's value in actually handwriting the notes about how you're feeling. So just know you have my permission to do these exercises and then get rid of that stuff. You don't have to keep the journal around. Okay. So I want you to write those both down, answer those questions, and that is the starting point. Now, I want to bring in something that I use in my work as a marriage and family therapist, because I think it gives you a really useful map for understanding what happens when resentment goes unaddressed in a relationship. Dr. John Gottman, I think I've talked about him on here before, but he is one of the most well-known researchers in relationship science, and he spent decades studying couples, and what he found is that there's 4 specific communication patterns that predict the breakdown of a relationship with extraordinary accuracy. And he called them the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. So they are criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. And I want to walk you through each one briefly, and then I want to focus in on the one that is most directly connected to resentment, because understanding this is going to change how you see what is happening in your relationship when things get hard. So criticism is the first horseman. It's when you attack your partner's character rather than addressing a specific behavior. So it sounds like you never help me, or you are so selfish, or why are you always like this? And the key words to listen for criticism are always and never. It moves from talking about what happened in a specific situation to talking about who they are as a person. So this might show up as an example of, you never notice when things need to be done around here. You just wait for me to do everything. If you've ever said something like that to your partner, that might be criticism showing up. All right. Horseman number 2 is contempt. Now, contempt is the most dangerous of the 4 because it communicates disgust and superiority. And it includes things like eye rolling, sarcasm, name calling, and mockery. It says, I'm better than you. And Gottman found that contempt is the single strongest predictor of divorce. So this is something that we want to be very careful to avoid in relationships. It is a very dangerous thing to have. So an example of this showing up might be an eye roll when he complains about being tired after a day where you know that you did twice as much, or a sarcastic comment about how nice it must be to just sit down when you get home. Okay. So little jabs at each other. That's a dangerous one. Horseman number 3 is defensiveness. Defensiveness is what happens when someone feels attacked, and instead of really listening to what the other person is saying, they make themselves the victim. So it sounds like, well, I was going to do that, or I do plenty around here, you just never notice. An example of this might be you bring up the mental load and then he immediately lists everything that he has done this week rather than hearing what you are saying. So it becomes this like competition between the two of you almost. And defensiveness puts up the walls so that you're not going to actually hear what the other person is saying. Horseman number 4 is stonewalling. And this is when someone completely shuts down. So they go quiet, they might leave the room or become a total brick wall to you. And it often looks like he's being dismissive, but what Gottman found is that it is usually a sign of being physiologically flooded in the moment, meaning his nervous system or your nervous system is so activated that you literally cannot process the conversation anymore. So an example of this might be that you try to have a conversation about how you're feeling and he just goes completely silent or walks away. Now, here is where resentment comes in. Resentment is not one of the four horsemen officially, but it is the fuel that feeds them. So when resentment builds up over time and it's unaddressed, eventually it comes out as one of the four horsemen. So whether that's a critical comment, a contemptuous tone, a defensive reaction, or a total shutdown. And once those patterns are established, they become really difficult to change because they become the default mode of communication in the relationship, which is why addressing the resentment before it gets there is so important. Now, Gottman did identify specific antidotes to each of the four horsemen. So if you're freaking out and you're going, oh no, my relationship already has these things, don't worry. It's still good to address the resentment, but also there's something that you can do to try to help these four horsemen soften or go away completely in your relationship. Okay. So the antidote to criticism is what he called a gentle startup. And that is describing how you feel and what you need without attacking who your partner is as a person. So the antidote to contempt is building a culture of appreciation. It's actively noticing and expressing gratitude for what your partner does rather than cataloging everything that they're not doing. And the antidote to defensiveness is taking responsibility, finding even a small piece of the situation that you can own or take responsibility for, rather than immediately trying to put your walls up and protect yourself. And then the fourth antidote to stonewalling is physiological self-soothing. So recognizing when you or your partner are flooded and then agreeing to take a break and return to the conversation at a later time rather than letting it end unresolved. But underneath all of those antidotes is one foundational thing. You have to actually say what you are feeling, not just the horseman version of that in some nasty communication method, but a real version of what you're feeling. And that is what I want to give you a script for right now, so you can actually use this in a conversation. Okay, so here's what naming resentment actually sounds like in a conversation with your partner. And I want to be really specific here because most of us were never taught how to do this. And the structure is actually very simple. So I feel blank when blank because blank. And what I need is blank. All right, so you need to fill in those blanks. Not you always do this or you never do that. Not why don't you do this? Just I feel blank when blank happens, because blank, and what I need is blank. So let me give you two examples, one for situational resentment and one for relational resentment. First one for situational resentment. This is when the context of what's going on isn't great, but it's not necessarily about the person. It's more what's happening in the relationship or in life. So I feel really depleted lately. And I think a lot of it is coming from feeling like I don't have a choice about working the way I do. It is not about you specifically. I just need you to know that I'm carrying some grief about the life that I thought we would have, and sometimes it comes out sideways. Can we talk about what might help? I really like in this example how there's the invitation at the end for the partner to join in solving the problem together. Rather than this statement being, I have a problem with you, it's I'm dealing with this. I'm just letting you know as my partner. Can you help me with that? All right. The second one is for relational resentment. I feel overwhelmed and honestly a little resentful when I come home and the things that I was hoping would be done are not. Not because I think you're a bad partner, but because I am already running on empty. And I feel like the gap between what I am managing and what you're managing right now is really big. And I need us to talk about how we divide things up because the current arrangement is not working for me. So do you hear the difference there? Neither one of those are attacking the partner. Neither one of those uses always or never. And neither one of those requires him to be wrong in order for you to be heard and for him to want to join you in trying to address it. Okay, I want to pause real quick to talk about We Are Amma. If you are looking for the perfect mom gift, if you have a friend who is pregnant right now and she needs a baby shower gift, We Are Amma makes the most beautiful wearable like clothing pieces, dresses, tops for nursing moms. They also make the perfect nursing cover called the Cocoon. It's breathable, soft, comfy. I use it not just as a nursing cover, but also for covering the stroller or as a scarf or just because it's a cute top when it's cool outside. They also have jewelry, so many cute things for new moms. So whether you want to treat yourself, you need to drop a hint to somebody else, or you know someone who needs a gift like this, definitely check them out. I'm going to leave the link for them down below. And if you use the code Melissa, Melissa, you will get 15% off your entire order. And that's on top of any sales or promotions that they have going on. So definitely check them out. Really good stuff. I have multiple pieces from them and I love all of it. I've given it to others and they love it too. If you go check them out, use that code Melissa. And just as a full disclosure, I do get a little bit of a commission when you use my code, and that just helps me keep the show going. So thank you for your support in doing that. It doesn't cost you anything extra. All right, let's get back to the show. Okay, so now you have a script that you can use and a basic framework that you can use, but I also want to give you a few practical tips for actually having this conversation so it goes well, because even the best script can go totally sideways if the conditions are not right. So tip number 1 is to prepare, but do not over prepare. I want you to know what you want to say before you sit down to have this conversation. You can write it down. You can use the to-list strategy where it's situational and relational resentment. So you have a very clear understanding of which is which. And then you can pick one specific thing from the relational list to focus on, just one, not all of it at once. That is very overwhelming for the other person. And it's helpful if it's something recent and something very concrete, not like the last 5 years and the pattern that you've been watching. Keep it very simple, very specific. Okay. This is a starting point. And once your partner learns that you're not out to get them and y'all can work through something together successfully, then you can approach more. Okay. I do not want you to rehearse this so much that it becomes a monologue, because the moment that it feels like a monologue to him, the conversation is going to be over. You want to be prepared enough to stay on track, but open enough to actually hear him as well. It needs to be a dialogue back and forth, a conversation, not a presentation. Okay. That's the goal here. Tip number 2 is to check your nervous system before you start and during the conversation. So here's something that I genuinely love to tell couples in session because it's really, really helpful. If you have a smartwatch or a fitness tracker that monitors your heart rate, use it during these conversations. Okay. Gottman's research found that when your heart rate goes above roughly 100 beats per minute, the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that's actually responsible for listening and empathy and rational thinking, it basically goes offline. So you are physiologically flooded at that point. And no productive conversation is going to happen when you are in a flooded state or when they are in a flooded state. So before you start the conversation, check your heart rate. If you're already elevated, take a few minutes, 10 minutes or so if you need to really just go for a walk, sit down and do some slow breathing, do something that brings you back down and grounds you. And then during the conversation, if you notice yourself getting activated and your heart is racing or your voice is shaking or changing, you're starting to cry or shut down or get louder, all of those are signs that one or both of you is becoming more flooded. And here's what I want you to know what to do when that happens. It's okay to take a break, but you need to do this correctly, because one of the biggest issues that couples run into is that someone calls a break, but then they never come back to the conversation. And so they ended up stonewalling and removing themselves, but they called it like self-care, helpful in the moment. And in the moment, maybe it was fine, but not coming back to it is a break. So or is the mistake there. So if you are going to take a break, you need to name a specific time to return, not just quote unquote later, but a very specific time. So like, are we doing this later tonight? Are we doing this tomorrow? Are we having this conversation this weekend? Are we doing it during nap time? Like, when are we going to come back to take 20 minutes and actually try and resolve this a little bit more? And you actually do come back. So that's the difference between a healthy pause and stonewalling. Tip number 3 is to choose the right time and protect the space. Timing matters more than most people realize. Do not have a conversation like this right before dinner when everyone is hungry and maybe you're getting a little hangry and the kids are right underneath you and needing you. Do not have it when one of you just walked into the door after a long day. Do not have this at 10 o'clock at night when you're both trying to get to bed, you're running on fumes, and there's literally nowhere for it to go because you're about to fall asleep or need to fall asleep even if you're still awake. All right. The best time is after the kids are in bed and before you are both getting into bed yourselves. You want enough time to have a real conversation, but not so much open-ended time that it feels like it could go on forever and ever. And I want to give you permission to say, if this conversation is taking more than 30 or 40 minutes and it's not going anywhere productive, it's okay to say, I want to finish this and I do not think either of us is in the right place tonight to continue this conversation. Can we come back to this on Saturday morning and then actually, put it on your calendar, whether that's mentally or physically putting it on the calendar. But you do not have to resolve everything in one conversation. It's okay. And I know there's going to be partners in the couple that want to have the conversation until it's solved. And there's going to be the one who's like, nope, we can come back to this never. Y'all need to meet in the middle somewhere. It does not have to all be resolved in one conversation. You just have to make sure that you're not dropping it entirely. So to recap, prepare, but do not over prepare. Check your nervous system and take real breaks with a return time if you need to. And choose a time that gives the conversation the space it deserves without making it feel like an all-night negotiation. All right. I'm going to bring all of this together now. Resentment in a working mom relationship is almost never just about the dishes. It is a signal that something is out of balance and a need is not being met. And before you can address it, you have to know whether you are resentful about your circumstances, your partner, or both. The 4 horsemen, criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling, are what resentment looks like when it has gone unaddressed for too long. And the antidote is not a perfectly handled conversation. It is just starting to say the real thing instead of the horseman version of it coming out. So using the I feel statements, the I feel blank when blank because blank, and what I need is blank structure, framework, use that. Preparing without over preparing for the conversation is important. Checking your nervous system, choosing the right time, and committing to come back to it if you need to take a break. All of those things are important. Okay? You can do this. I know you can. I know it's difficult. I know it's uncomfortable. I know it's not fun, but you can do this. Now, if you listen to all of that and you are thinking, I do not even know where to start, or if this is even going to be possible for us. We've tried having these conversations and they almost always end the same way. And if that is you, I just need you to know that that's exactly what a clarity call can be used for. Okay. It's just you and me for 45 minutes. We look at what's actually happening in your specific situation. I'll help you figure out whether this is a situational or relational issue or both. And then we can talk about what a real next step looks like for you specifically. You can book one for free at drmelissawelch.com/book. There is no pressure, no pitch. It's just an honest conversation between the two of us. If I feel like I can help you, I'll let you know. If I feel like there's something else that's going to be a better option for you, I will let you know that too. I have a very limited number of those available because I'm a busy working mom just like you are. And I do take the time out of my calendar to meet with you for those 45 minutes on Zoom. So if that's something that you truly want, you're committed to doing, let's have that conversation. drmelissawelch.com/book. If this episode helped you, please share it with a working mom or a working parent who needs to hear it today. I want you to just think of one person right now and then send it their way, and make sure that you are following along or subscribed wherever you are listening. And that way you get notifications when new episodes drop. I try to do them on Tuesdays, but as you can see from this episode, it's not always a Tuesday. So if you're subscribed or following, it'll let you know when those new episodes do drop, which is nice. Also, if you like what you're hearing and you're getting help from it, it would mean the world to me if you would leave a review. It really helps in terms of getting the show pushed out to others who have not discovered it yet. And that's a really big help for me. Alrighty, that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for listening. And until next time, take care of yourself and be well.